Okay, ready to dive in. Today we're tackling something I think we've all encountered at some point, right? Career burnout.
Oh, it's a real thing, isn't it? And so prevalent these days.
For sure. And thankfully, you all sent in some seriously helpful tips on how to deal with it, which I decided to dig into with you today, along with our expert.
I'm happy to be here.
So we're talking about recognizing those sneaky signs of burnout and then figuring out how to prioritize, our well-being, even when work feels like it's taking over everything.
Yes, because it's so easy to let those demands just creep in, and before you know it, you're drowning.
Exactly. And our source for today's deep dive actually points out that burnout, it can show up in really sneaky ways. It's not just like feeling tired, is it?
No, not at all. We're talking physical, mental, and emotional exhaustion, which honestly, all combined, it can be totally overwhelming.
It sounds completely overwhelming. So where do we even begin? What are some of those, red flags, those subtle signs that we might be missing?
Yeah, it's not always as obvious as you'd think. On the physical side, I mean, beyond just like pure fatigue, think about things like, are you getting headaches all the time?
Oh, those tension headaches.
Yes, or are your muscles constantly tense? Do you find yourself clenching your jaw?
Oh, yeah.
Even changes in your sleep patterns or your appetite. These can all be our body's way of waving a big old flag that something's not quite right.
Wow. So it's like our own internal warning system.
Yeah,
So if I'm like suddenly craving all the carbs or waking up at 3 a.m. every night,
could be a sign for sure.
okay,
Yeah.
noted. What about on the mental side of things?
So, mentally, burnout can often manifest as that dreaded brain fog. You know that feeling, right? Where you just can't focus. Ugh, yes.
Or you're struggling to remember things, or you sit down to a task and you just feel totally paralyzed, like your brain just cannot
Oh
even.
my gosh, yes. And then it's like, it just makes you feel worse because you're like, why can't I just do this one simple thing?
Exactly. It's like this awful cycle of, I should be able to do this. Why can't I do this? And then you just feel worse and worse.
And then you procrastinate more, which just adds to the stress.
Exactly. And then, of course, there's the emotional exhaustion, which honestly, I think for a lot of people, that's the most draining part of all.
I can see why.
It's that feeling of just being emotionally spent. Like you're running on fumes. You might even feel cynical, or just lacking any real motivation.
Yeah, like, ugh, I just can't, even today.
Exactly.
That's definitely not a sustainable way to, you know, go through life. Not at all.
Yeah.
Which is why, recognizing these signs early on is absolutely
It's
key.
like anything, right? The earlier you catch it, the better.
Exactly.
Okay, so once we've kind of like identified that something might be up, that maybe we're headed towards burnout or we're in it, what do we do? How do we actually start to address this? Because our source outlines 5 key tips,
Hmm.
and I want to make sure we have time to get to all of them.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so the first one that really resonated with me is prioritizing self-care, which, again, it sounds so obvious, right?
It does.
But it's often the first thing to go when we're stressed or busy.
Absolutely.
So, what does that look like for you? What are some of your go-to self-care practices that you found really help you stay balanced?
It's funny because I used to think self-care had to be this big, elaborate thing.
A whole spa day.
Yes. A full spa date and a weekend retreat and all this stuff I could never find the time for.
Right.
But actually, it's more about finding those small pockets of time throughout the day and making them really count. Have you ever heard of the Pomodoro technique?
Yes. I actually love the Pomodoro technique.
Tell everyone what it is.
Okay, so for anyone who doesn't know, basically it's like this time management method where you work in these like focused intervals, usually like 25 minutes,
Right.
and then you take a short break, and then you repeat that.
Exactly. And the research on this is amazing. Even those short breaks, they can significantly reduce stress hormones and actually improve your focus in the long run.
You come back feeling refreshed.
Exactly. And for me personally, I found even just like 5 minutes of mindful breathing, even if I'm in the middle of the workday, can totally shift my energy.
I love that. So it's about those little intentional pauses throughout the day.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, so we've got self-care, and then another really important tip that our source mentions is setting boundaries,
Oh, that's a big one.
which can be really tough to do. So any advice on how to actually like have that conversation with, say, an employer or a manager?
Yeah, it's definitely a skill, but it's a skill that can be learned. I think the first step is getting really clear on what your non-negotiables are.
Mhm.
What are the things that absolutely have to happen outside of work to keep you healthy?
Like what?
Like whether it's, that exercise class or dinner with your family or just like an hour to unwind before bed, whatever it is, identify those things. And then when you're communicating those boundaries, I think the key is to remember that you're not asking for permission. You're respectfully informing them of what you need to be your best self at work.
I love that because I think so often we're afraid to have those conversations because we think, oh, they're going to think I'm not dedicated or they're going to think I'm not a hard worker. But really, it's the opposite.
It really is. It's about sustainability. So
Exactly.
you're saying, I want to be here. I want to do my best work. In order to do that, these are the things I need.
You're creating that sustainable balance for the long haul. Okay, so self-care, boundaries, another tip our source highlights is delegation.
Ooh,
Yes.
yes, delegation.
Which I'll admit is something I personally struggle with.
Yeah,
Like I have this thing where I'm like, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself.
right. Or it'll just be faster if I do it.
Yes.
It's so tempting to think that.
It is. So how do we get over that?
Well, first, I think it's important to remember that delegation, it's not about just offloading tasks. It's about empowering others to contribute their strengths.
Oh, I like that.
Right. And also, by delegating effectively, you free yourself up to focus on the things that only you can do.
Oh, the things that actually require your expertise.
Yes, it's about working smarter, not just harder.
I love it.
So think about those tasks that you could potentially hand off without compromising quality. Maybe it's administrative stuff, data entry, or even parts of a larger project that someone else could take the lead on. By delegating effectively, you not only help yourself, you also help others grow.
It's a win-win.
Exactly.
Okay, love it. Now, our source also stresses the importance of seeking support, which I think is huge.
So important.
And this can look like a lot of different things. It can be from managers, colleagues, friends, family, mental health professionals.
Whatever feels right for you.
Exactly. But what would you say to someone who's maybe a little hesitant to reach out for help?
I would say, first of all, you're not alone. Burnout is incredibly common.
So common.
And admitting that you need support is not a weakness. In fact, it's a sign of incredible strength and self-awareness.
It means you're in tune with what's going on.
Exactly. I always say it's like if you had a physical injury, you wouldn't hesitate to see a doctor, right?
Right.
Mental health is just as important.
We got to take care of the whole package.
Exactly. And sometimes just talking to someone, whether it's a therapist, a coach, a trusted friend, or even just starting with a family member, it can provide such a fresh perspective and help you navigate those challenges so much more effectively.
It's true. Just having someone to listen and offer support can make a world of difference.
Absolutely.
Okay. So as we start to wrap up this deep dive, I just want to say this has been incredibly eye-opening. We've covered so much ground today, from recognizing those sneaky signs of burnout to like practical ways to reclaim our well-being.
I hope so.
I'm already thinking about those little changes I can start making today.
I love that.
Because every little bit counts.
Yeah.
Every little bit helps.
Exactly. So for everyone listening, as we wrap up, think about what resonated most with you today. What's one tiny action you can take right now to prioritize your own well-being?
Yeah. What's one thing you can do for yourself?
Because self-care isn't selfish.
Not at all.
It's essential.
It's essential.
Until next time, take care of yourselves.